You notice it, don't you? That strange comfort you feel when you're alone with your thoughts. The way an imagined conversation feels safer than a real one. How planning the project feels more satisfying than actually starting it. You're more alive in your head than you are in the world. And before you dismiss this as just overthinking or introversion, understand something. This isn't a personality quirk. This is psychological withdrawal, a survival pattern your mind created when reality became too unpredictable to trust. Let me show you what I mean. Think about the last time you had to make a phone call. A simple one. Scheduling an appointment, asking a question, confirming details. You delayed it, maybe for hours, maybe for days. But here's what you did instead. You rehearsed it. You built the entire conversation in your mind. You predicted their responses. You crafted your tone. You prepared for every possible outcome. And in that mental theater, you were perfect, calm, articulate, in control. That version of the interaction felt more real than the actual call ever would. This isn't just preparation. This is mental inhabitation. You're not getting ready for reality. You're replacing it. Your mind has become a simulation chamber where you experience life without the risk of life actually touching you. And the reason is devastatingly simple. Your mind is the only place where you have total control. In your thoughts, people respond the way you need them to. Outcomes align with your expectations. Pain is optional. Rejection doesn't exist. Reality offers none of these guarantees. So you retreat. Not because you're weak, but because your nervous system learned, somewhere early on, that the external world is where bad things happen without warning. This pattern didn't start last week. It started when you were small. Maybe you grew up in a home where emotions were unpredictable, where a parent could shift from warmth to anger without explanation, where your attempts to connect were sometimes met with love and sometimes with dismissal, and you never knew which one was coming. So you stopped trying to predict them. You stopped trying to control the outside. You turned inward. Your inner world became the place where things made sense, where you could process what happened, where you could be safe. This was brilliant, adaptive, necessary. But what starts as a survival tool becomes a permanent residence. You're still living there decades later, even though the danger may have passed. And now, the pattern has deepened. Now, you don't just retreat when things are chaotic. You retreat preemptively. Before anything even happens. You imagine the job interview so many times that you exhaust yourself before the actual event. You mentally compose the text message with such precision that sending it feels redundant. You visualize the social gathering so intensely that attending it feels like a rerun. Your mental life has become more vivid, more detailed, more emotionally saturated than your physical one. And the world outside started to feel like a pale imitation of the richness you experience alone. Here's where it gets tricky. Because this retreat into your mind doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like depth, like intelligence, like sensitivity. You're not hiding. You're thinking, processing, analyzing, preparing. You're not procrastinating. You're strategizing. You're not afraid. You're just being thorough. This is the story you tell yourself. And it's convincing because there's truth in it. You do think deeply. You do process complexity that others miss. You do notice layers of meaning that slide past most people. But here's the shadow side. You've started to confuse contemplation with action, reflection with participation, understanding with living. You spend hours researching the perfect workout routine, but never go to the gym. You fantasize about the novel you'll write, but never open the document. You mentally rehearse the difficult conversation, but never actually have it. And every time you do this, you feel like you've done something. Your brain rewards you with the same dopamine hit it would give you for real accomplishment. Because to your nervous system, the mental simulation is almost indistinguishable from the actual event. This is phantom achievement, the sensation of progress without the reality of it. And it's incredibly seductive, because it gives you the emotional payoff of growth without the vulnerability of real-world exposure. You get to feel like someone who is working on themselves, evolving, changing, without ever actually changing. Let me be clear about something. Your inner world is not the problem. A rich internal life is not a pathology. The ability to think deeply, to imagine vividly, To process complexity, these are gifts. But when your inner world becomes a fortress instead of a garden, when it becomes a place you hide rather than a place you grow, it stops serving you. And you know this. You feel it. You feel the growing gap between who you are in your mind and who you are in the world. In your thoughts, you're articulate, confident, clear. You say exactly what you mean. You stand up for yourself. You take risks. You connect. But in reality, you hesitate. You soften your words. You accommodate. You withdraw. And every time this happens, the gap widens. You start to prefer the mental version of yourself, because that version isn't constrained by fear or awkwardness or the messy unpredictability of other humans. That version is who you would be if the world were safe. But the world is not safe. And waiting for it to become safe is waiting forever. So you stay in your head, where everything is manageable, controllable, yours. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you stop participating in your own life. You become a spectator, an analyst, a narrator of experiences you're not actually having. And the loneliest part, no one knows, because you've gotten so good at performing presence. You show up, you smile, you respond, you fulfill obligations, but you're not really there. You're narrating the experience from inside your mind, watching yourself interact, evaluating your performance, editing in real time. You're experiencing your life as a third-person observer, and this creates a strange kind of suffering. Not dramatic, not urgent, just a persistent, low-grade sense of disconnection, of watching life happen through glass. So why do you keep choosing the mental version over the real one? The surface answer is comfort, control, predictability, but beneath that is something sharper. The fear of being seen inaccurately. You are not afraid of being seen. You are afraid of being misunderstood, misinterpreted, reduced. In your mind, you get to be the full, complex, contradictory human you actually are. But in reality, people see fragments. They make assumptions. They project. They simplify you into categories that do not fit. And this feels like violence. Not because they are cruel, but because their perception of you does not match the intricate truth of who you know yourself to be. So you withdraw. You stop offering the full version. You show them the safe parts, the manageable parts, the parts that will not be misread. And you save the real you for the privacy of your own thoughts. This is protective concealment, and it makes perfect sense. But here is what it costs you: intimacy, real connection, the experience of being known. Because being truly seen requires being seen inaccurately. Sometimes, it requires letting people get it wrong, letting them stumble through understanding you, letting them see the parts that do not make sense yet. But you cannot tolerate that. So you manage the narrative. You control the impression. You stay in the mental rehearsal where you can script both sides of the interaction. And you call this safety. But it is not safety. It is isolation disguised as self-protection. Part 6. The paradox of the observer here is the deepest irony. The more time you spend in your mind analyzing yourself, the less you actually know yourself. Because you do not discover who you are by thinking about it. You discover who you are by acting, by responding, by colliding with reality, and seeing what emerges. Your true self is not hiding in your thoughts, waiting to be uncovered through introspection. Your true self is revealed through engagement. When you take the risk, when you make the call, when you send the message, when you show up imperfectly, that is when you meet yourself. Not the imagined version, the real one, the one who fumbles, who surprises you, who is braver than you thought, or more fragile, or stranger. But you will never meet that person if you stay in the rehearsal. You will only meet the idealized projection, the character you have written, the self you think you should be. And no matter how much you refine that character, it will always feel slightly false, because it is. Part 7. The quiet grief. There is a kind of mourning that happens when you live primarily in your mind. You grieve the experiences you almost had, the connections you almost made, the versions of your life that stayed theoretical. You feel this when you see old friends posting about their lives, when you hear about opportunities you considered but never pursued, when you realize how much time has passed while you were planning to start living. This grief is not dramatic. It does not crash over you in waves. It sits quiet in the background, a persistent ache, a sense of something missing that you cannot quite name, and you cope with it by returning to your mind, by imagining future scenarios where you finally break the pattern, where you become the person who acts instead of observes. But those scenarios stay imaginary too, and the cycle continues. Part 8. The return to reality. So, how do you break this? Not by force, not by shaming yourself into action. You break it by understanding that reality is not the enemy. The world is not inherently more dangerous than your mind. It is just more uncertain, and uncertainty is not the same as threat. Your nervous system learned to equate the two, but they are different. Uncertainty means you do not know what will happen. Threat means harm is coming. You have been treating every uncertain moment as a threat, every unscripted interaction as potential danger. So you script everything, rehearse everything, control everything you can inside your mind before you let it touch the world. But here is what you miss. The best parts of being alive happen in the uncertain moments. The conversation that goes somewhere unexpected, the connection you did not plan for, the version of yourself that emerges when you stop managing the outcome. These moments only exist outside your mind. They require you to release control, to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing, to trust that you can handle whatever happens without pre-processing it to death. And yes, this is terrifying, because it means giving up the one place where you feel completely safe. But that safety is costing you aliveness. You are not meant to experience life as a rehearsal. You are meant to experience it as improvisation, messy, unpredictable, unscripted. That is where growth happens, not in the mental simulation, in the actual collision with reality. Part 9. The truth you already know this. Somewhere beneath the rationalizations and the comfortable habits, you know that you are living at half capacity. You feel it when you cancel plans last minute, when you write the email but do not send it, when you watch yourself pull back just as you were about to reach out. You feel it in the gap between your inner richness and your outer expression. And the hardest part is this: no one can pull you out. No technique, no insight, no perfect understanding. You are the only one who can decide to stop rehearsing and start living. And that decision is not made once. It is made every single day. Every single moment you feel the pull back into your mind, and you choose differently. You choose the phone call over the mental script, the real conversation over the imagined one, the imperfect action over the perfect plan. Not because it is comfortable, but because you cannot grow in comfort. You can only refine what you already know, polish what you already are. Growth requires friction, uncertainty, the vulnerability of not knowing how it will go. Your mind cannot give you that. Only reality can. The final mororso here is the question that actually matters. Not why do you prefer your mind over reality. You already know why. The question is, how much longer are you willing to live as a spectator in your own life? How many more years will you spend rehearsing conversations you never have, planning projects you never start, imagining connections you never make? How much more time will you give to the comfortable prison of your thoughts before you realize that the discomfort of living is better than the safety of watching? You do not need more understanding. You do not need more preparation. You do not need to fix yourself before you engage. You just need to choose reality, messy and certain, controllable reality. One small act at a time. Send the message without editing it 17 times. Make the call without rehearsing. Show up without knowing exactly how it will go. And notice what happens. Not in your mind, in the world. Because that is where you actually exist. That is where your life is happening. And it is waiting for you to stop narrating and start participating.